Hello, everyone, and welcome to FinTech Leaders, coming to you from New York City. I'm your host, Miguel Armaza. I'm a co-founder of Gilgamesh Ventures, a venture capital fund that backs early-stage FinTech entrepreneurs in the US and Latin America. If you enjoyed this conversation, I invite you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows so more people can learn about FinTech leaders. In this episode, I sit down with Rodger Desai, CEO and founder of Prove, one of the leading global companies in identity verification and fraud reduction. Founded in 2008, Prove serves over 1,000 corporations, including 9 of the top 10 US banks, and has raised around $200 million from Wellington, Oak HCFT, Apax Digital, Mass Mutual, AmEx, Capital One, Verizon, and a long list of funds and impressive angels. In this episode, we discuss why KYC processes will become nearly free in the near future, using cell phone and telecom data to reduce scams and improve identity verification, implications of AI-powered fraud, how Rodger keeps his own data and digital identity safe and away from bad actors, and a lot more. Rodger, thanks for joining us on FinTech Leaders. How's everything today at Prove?
Things are great at Prove.
So, Rodger, let's start with your background, because you do have an interesting background, and maybe we can tie that in with your inspiration behind launching Prove, because I know that's an interesting story.
Yeah. I've always found it fascinating that some of the best ideas in business happen because you can kind of cross-pollinate. You can take things that one industry solves their problems a certain way, and you can bring it to another industry. So that was the basis of starting Brew. We, many of us are pretty involved in the phone world. I mean, we know we built phone companies. I helped build Airtel in Spain, which is now built up in Spain. And in the process, we got really, really thoughtful and good about how phones work. And if you think of how phones work, we kind of take them for granted, but they're quite amazing. You can go anywhere in the world and your phone just works. And our thought was, could we bring that notion of how phones work, where it's convenient, secure, private, accurate, all at the same time without trade-offs? And you bring that to the internet and kind of solve problems around identity with that same notion. So that's what we intended to do. We started a company with the notion of bringing the goodness of how phones work to the internet.
Now, Rodger, the reality is that you launched the business over a decade ago, correct me if I'm wrong. And in the last decade, mobile technology has changed dramatically. It's almost unrecognizable, although, of course, many things have remained the same. As a company, how do you anticipate staying ahead of these changes? How do you keep up? Maybe share us how you think about building for a future.
People, I'm sure, wonder, like, whatever we invented a decade ago when we started the company, well, surely that's been displaced and there's more better ways to do that. But we actually were pretty ahead of our time. That story where Henry Ford was asked, like, what consumers would want from Ford, and he said faster horses. And I think that's kind of the way the industry is, where the current way things are done, people are just trying to make it better and faster versus rethinking it whole thought. So the approach we came up with a decade ago, we think is still very novel a decade later. And now plenty of folks are recognizing that. But I think it's the future. I think the way in which transactions are adjudicated, whether it's opening an account or logging in or making a payment or whatever it may be, I think the future is the way that Prue thought the world would look like a decade ago.
So we're going to talk about, I guess, the present and the future in a second. But take us back to those initial days. I'm sure building the team is always something that founders have to be very careful with, sometimes struggle with recruiting that initial team. Take us to the early days. What was your approach to assembling that initial SWAT team?
You know, if you think of like kind of what it takes to make a cake, you have eggs and flour. And if you, let's say you forgot the eggs and you bake the cake, and you're like, oh, and the cake's done. And then you just break an egg over the top of the cake, right? Well, that's not going to make the cake. Like you have to kind of bake it from the onset with the right ingredients. And so we knew that in our particular case, we're bringing the phone world to the internet. And so we had to have people that knew the phone world, knew internet technology, but also the initial use cases around banking, people that understood banks. And so we had to kind of get a piece of each of the pies to kind of build our unique version of our solution and our platform. And it was hard because these are very different industries that don't normally talk to one another. I remember there was a call I was on with internal folks and they were arguing about the word line. And as I'm listening to the argument, I realized that they were talking about very different definitions of line. So if you're from banking, a line is a credit line. And if you're from like the phone world, a line is, well, it's a mobile line or voice over IP line or a landline. And so they were literally arguing about the word line and completely talking past each other because it meant different things in their worlds. So we had to get the right components on the onset so we could kind of make this unique operation together with the right fundamentals.
And Rodger, so talking about Prove, over the last few years, you've definitely helped shape and build some of the industry standards are used today, specifically for when it comes to identity verification. Can you zoom in a little bit more on that? What have been some of the biggest breakthroughs from Prove?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to like how phones work, because to us, it's quite magical, but you can take it for granted. So let's say this summer you go to Greece for a vacation. When you get there, let's say you live in the US, so you may have AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile. When you get to Greece, what should happen if it was a normal e-commerce transaction, which it is, like you'll connect to some local Greek phone company, which effectively is a merchant. What should happen, if it was designed like a web experience, it would say, welcome to Greece, but who are you and how do you want to pay for your calls while you're here? Then, of course, you see a form and you have a name and an address and then eventually a payment method. So one, that's just what should happen. Two, it'd be a little bit cumbersome, like you land on the runway and you want to call a relative that you got there safely, but then you have to fill out a form. And the problem with that kind of experience is not just that it's cumbersome to kind of fill out a form when you land somewhere to get connected. The problem is you could lie and say you're someone else. And an average person in the US with their family may spend $1,000 to $2,000 to $3,000 a year for their phone plan. So it's not a trivial thing. If people could bill calls to you and text messages, if they could do that for free, and because they can charge it to you, people would surely do that. So in a world where you land in the country and you have to identify who you are, folks would lie if they could. And that's essentially what's wrong with the web. The reason the phone world works so well, where there's no trade-off between convenience, security, privacy, like it's all kind of the promise of web being already delivered. The reason it works so well, because you're never asked who you are. So I did go to Japan tomorrow, and when I land, I'll connect to some random phone company, which is a merchant, and I don't have to even register with them. My SIM card will act as my proxy. So the point of all that is the way in which things get better without trade-offs is removing the human from the security process. Like I shouldn't have to be involved in securing myself. I should be involved in how I want my data to be used, and I should consent to how data is shared. But I shouldn't be literally involved in securing myself. Because of course people are good at that, or they can be social engineered, people compose as others, et cetera, et cetera. So all that being said, what we brought to the industry is this notion of, well, what if you could use a cryptographic key as a bank to authenticate your customers there versus things like username, password, knowledge-based questions, like things that are easily able to manipulate. So our notion is that the future will involve using keys. Now, a SIM card is a key, effectively. The folks that make EV chips make SIM cards are the same technology. So SIM cards are keys, pass keys are keys. We've got a new project with a major bank called AirKey. That's a key. So if you could tie keys that can be authenticated cryptographically to identities, then it kind of moves the whole world to a more deterministic place. And that's exactly how phones work. It's not probabilistic, it's deterministic.
If you think back to when you were initially rolling out your product, from my point of view, this requires a lot of collaboration and big partnerships from businesses, because a lot of the users, they don't even know they're using Proof. What were some of the biggest hurdles that you had to overcome when it comes to negotiations, approvals, and all that for your main product to actually go live?
Well, in startups, the biggest issue typically is timing. Like, of course, you don't want to be too late, but you also don't want to be too early because it could take a lot of time and capital and patience to get there. When we started, the kind of belief was that identity was uploading a driver's license or a passport, something like that. Authentication was getting a one-time passcode. And we knew that was problematic because, again, you're relying on the human to do those things in a way that could be manipulated. The humans can lie to you, humans can be manipulated, other humans can pose as others. So we knew that ultimately that would be defeated, but that was the conventional wisdom. So we had to have the conviction to know that there was a better way and have the patience to kind of educate those fine early adopters of this notion, because we knew that we were on the right side of history.
So let's talk about your vision for the future of KYC, which is know your customer. Maybe share how it's been done the last few years, what you're seeing today, and where is it going?
I think because it's so difficult to know if people are who they claim to be, there's a lot of emphasis and focus on that. Well, and when there should be, right? The amount of money that's being spent on mitigating fraud and all the sort of bad things that can happen, from money laundering to financing terrorism, like, it's actually not going away. In fact, like, if you look at suspicious activity reports, they're actually going up, and fraud losses are going up, despite the attention, focus, and kind of capital being spent on stopping it. The point being, KYC is important and it's like paramount, but imagine a world where that's solved, where we can kind of get to a place where we are talking about who's behind a transaction. But again, going back to the phone world, it's so well done that you would never bother to identify who you are to make a phone call, which I know that sounds odd, but it should be something. If it was like in commerce, you should have to identify yourself. And there's no fraud, because if you ever look at a phone bill, which you likely don't, but if you do, you'll never find something on it that you didn't do, between a call, a text, a web session. And I know there's a kind of trivial transactions to some, but the accuracy is such that you don't bother looking. Whereas if you got a bank statement, of course, you always have to take a quick look because there could be something on there that you didn't do. So all that said, our view is that KYC, while super important, there will come a day, I don't think very far from now, where it effectively will be table stakes and be essentially free. I think KYC, IDV, kind of authentication will effectively be free. And therefore, what's next? And I think if you look at what kind of folks will want, banks or merchants, they want to know who you are, for sure, but then they want to get to, well, what do you want to do, right? And the power of Google is the fact that they can get intent from typing a web search. Who you are, I think, will be solved to an amazing degree of accuracy and effectively be commoditized to nothing. And then the question is, well, what do you want to do? And I think that's it's really interesting. And we're at Prue, we're very, very excited about that whole next question about what do you want to do and how do we help you do those things?
I'm curious if suspicious activity reports and malicious activity is going up, but also the amount of resources, time, money, effort is also going up to fight this issue. Do you think a lot of the resources are going just to the wrong place, like being thrown at a useless money pit?
Well, I think that it's easy to say that we can do a lot of things on the basis of keeping the bad folks out. Like, that kind of gives you a lot of leeway. It's interesting, if you ask privacy folks, they'll say fraud is not a reason to violate someone's privacy, right? Because it can be a loophole based invade someone's privacy. And I think because of that, I think the industry built around selling fear. Like, imagine if the airport said, well, the chance of the 100,000 people that pass through this airport is one really bad person, therefore we should spend 3 hours with each person. I mean, we'd be pretty frustrated, right? I think the industry focuses on kind of this notion that everyone thinks fraud is bad. So let's kind of talk about fraud in the sense that it's a scary world. We should frisk everyone. We find 100% of the fraudsters and but it's kind of looking at the wrong thing. In our view, 98% of transactions with consumers behind them, not server farm bots, are legitimate. So frisking everyone with a lot of hassle to find one bad one is not the right approach. But it's sell, right? You can sell on the basis of fear, and I think most industries sell on the basis of fear. I think being on the right side of things would be, let's create a way to, we're so that kind of partnering with CDs and authenticating folks that you can create a VIP lane for the good and kind of sequester the questionable and then spend time on those transactions.
And Rodger, going back to your point that KYC processes you think are going to become essentially free. They're going to cost almost nothing to the companies doing it. That's a big thing because there's a whole industry of companies with a business model that relies on KYC. So what's going to happen to these companies? How is the business model going to have to evolve?
Well, capitalism is a tough place where, you have to add value to survive and prosper and grow. And I think your eye has to be on that, not on what you think people should value. Like, you have to know what they will value. So, imagine, if you're a bank, sure, they got to know it's Miguel logging in, or Miguel does swipe for the account. Absolutely, that's paramount. But once that's figured out and goes to, effectively free, then it's well, what does Miguel want to do? Maybe we just had another child and wants to save for college. Maybe we're looking at a summer home. Maybe looking to, we all have aspirations of what we want to do to live better lives. And that's what it should be spent on. So, for example, Change Healthcare went through a massive attack recently, and the repercussions are going to be measured likely with billions of dollars. All right, that's terrible. Now, the billions of dollars that the healthcare industry will spend to recuperate and strengthen and all the things because of that breach, imagine that went to their mission, which is how about solving cancer, right? I mean, every company has a mission. It's not usually making things secure. I mean, that's just an expectation, right? But how about those billions go to solving some of the tougher societal issues? And so the purpose is not to spend more on security and fraud and risk, and it's to spend to make it table stakes, and then the rest should be focused on your company's mission. And that's what Prove is here for. Prove is here to help take these things out of the way in such a way that you can focus on what your mission as a business actually is.
How about KYB? Is that the next frontier? We're talking about human identification, user identification. How about business identification?
So it's a great point because, in the U.S., businesses are actually people. So in some ways, it sounds very different. The central problem with extensions of KYC is you don't know if the person doing something is lying to you. So, for example, during COVID, with all the money that was kind of given out in PPP loans, you'll hear reports of hundreds of billions of dollars that was given to the wrong people. And it's kind of devastating. So if I say, hey, I'm Miguel, Rodger Miguel, and I own this podcast business, and based on that, I get a loan during things like COVID. Well, one, it's not Miguel. And two, when you show up and say, well, actually, I'm Miguel, they're well, we already gave him the money. I mean, it has a lot of bad outcomes. And so the question is, how do you build from a foundation of ground truth? So, for example, in our kind of KYC consumer offerings, we're so good at identity because we focus on the thing that matters, which is accuracy, that I don't know a case where we got the identity wrong. So for folks that use our pre-fill product and with just a phone number and the authentication of the key, you can fill out someone's name, address, all the necessary things to apply for a bank account. I don't know if we're a case we get that wrong anymore. And the point being, in the central premise of Prove is because we don't ask who you are, we ask for your number and your phone, you can't lie to us. You can't say, oh no, I'm Rodger, I'm Miguel, I'm whoever I am. And in that ground truth of not having to ask a person where they are to get to the route truth, well, it is Miguel, can extend to other parts of the web. For example, it should be the case that if I say I'm Miguel's assistant or work for his podcast, I'm applying for a loan for the podcast, for working capital, it should be done in such a way that you can prove that Miguel is involved in that transaction. And we should be able to say, we know that this person, Miguel, owns these three businesses. If we ask them what businesses he owns, he may claim no business he does not. But what if you could connect the dots in such a way that, well, I know it's Miguel, and I know that Miguel owns these businesses, and therefore I'm going to tell you which of these businesses you want to apply for, not I'm a business, right? So if you have the ground truth, like, I know the businesses you own. Well, so how would one know that? Well, we connect and prove phone numbers and phones and SIM cards to SSNs. Well, there's actually a way to connect SSNs to e-islands. And therefore, you can't claim to have a business and we have to figure it out. We know what businesses you have. So we'll be announcing new products around small business and know your business in such a way that we're not going to ask you your business. We know your business, and then you can pick the business. And therefore, you can't pose as someone else or pose as someone who owns a business you don't own. And that's how it should be done. It should be like, again, don't ask the human to identify themselves or things about themselves, because there's a good chance that they'll lie to you.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the next frontier. And are there any interesting or even kind of scary fraud vectors that you have come across recently, be it in KYC or KYB?
For sure. And I won't be on the fear hype train of the bad things that AI will do, but I'll give you some examples. Like, our CFO just retired, but I worked with him for 9 years, and I sat near him. And a common situation could be our head of marketing coming by and saying, "Hey, did we make that deposit for that next trade show? Is it due today?" And being a CFO, he waits to the last minute because he wants to earn interest on the money sitting in our bank account. So after the marketing person leaves, about 10 minutes later, our CFO gets a call, and I can only hear his side of the conversation. And it's like, it starts off with like, "Yeah, you're right. Those Jets, one day they'll get their act together." And it moves on to, "Oh, Kate's great. She's in her third year in college." And then it moves on to, yeah, I sent you that email. Yeah, they wire the money over. And then he hangs up. So what's going on there? So after the marketing person talked to the CFO about this trade show, he said that, our CFO sent an email to our banker at Chase, and the Chase banker called him. The banker knows that he likes the Jets, that he's always disappointed, that he has a daughter named Kate, and that's the authentication, because how would an attacker know about his view on the Jets and what his daughter's doing, right? And then it's like, "Oh, you sent me that email." "Oh, we did. Okay, I'll wire that $200,000. All right, so now an example of an attacker kind of manipulating that fairly easily. An email shows up to the banker. It's from the approved domain, but it's not. It says, "Hey, urgent, I need to get this money over to this trade show." And then the banker calls the number, but that number has been SIM swapped in such a way that it goes to the attacker. And the attacker happened to find a video clip of our CFO on the web, and then basically they replay whatever they want to say. And then it's like, "Yeah, hey, how about those Jets?" It's like, "Oh, tell me about it," which by the way can go either way. Does reveal you like or dislike them. And then it's like, "Look, I'm running to a meeting. Did you get my email?" "Yeah, you just sent it." "Yeah, got it. We'll do it." And all of a sudden, $200,000 or $1 million or whatever gets wired out. All right. The point being, the notion of using probabilistic methods like, "I know you like the Jets" or "don't like the Jets," versus deterministic cryptographic keys you can authenticate, then prove, we'd be like, well, gee, we know that something happened with regard to that phone number because suddenly it went to another one. And that gives you a clue that the key isn't trustworthy. So to us, all the scary things in the world all go back to this notion of, let's stop guessing and let's be more deterministic using keys.
So these processes are going to have to completely change.
Yeah, in our view, I think it's just going to keep escalating because AI is just that good. I think about a year ago, I remember there was a board meeting and we typically write a letter. And in the letter, I included a photo of a tweet. Well, an image of a tweet, which was of a photo. And it was a bomb that exploded outside the Pentagon. And that moved markets, and it turned out to be a fake. But it was retweeted by major news outlets, right? Now, so imagine, especially with an election coming up, all sorts of election interference or things that happen because it's a major event with many consequences. So how do you trust the thing you're looking at, whether it's a video, photo, whatever it may be? And I think it goes back to like, we're going to need more and more ways to add trust to the digital economy. So how about in the future, that photo that I saw, about the bomb that didn't actually happen. That's what I'm thinking about. What if there's a watermark such that you can reveal that Miguel 1000, whatever handle you have within, let's say, Adobe's Brave Cloud, has a check mark in such a way that I don't have to know who you are. You don't want me to know who you are. However, if you break the law, you can kind of break the glass and see who really created that content. So I think everything will need that kind of signature, whether it's a blog post, picture, video, because we're never going to be able to detect that it's fake or not fake with the accuracy we need. It's going to be about who signed it.
You're probably the right person to ask this. In your day-to-day, are there any steps that you take to protect your digital identity or any tools that you think other people should also be doing?
It's a great question. And what's ironic is that there are things that can be done that can really protect you. And we just can't convince the phone companies to do it. Today, if everything really actually does involve keys. So for example, anytime you want to reset your password at Coinbase or a bank and get an OTP, well, effectively, that's trying to get to a SIM card because that's deterministic. However, so the question is, how do we make it so the phone companies can do added protection of your phone and phone number? And we're working on it. You can imagine, we're very concerned about kind of their customer security and safety as they do things online. But there is a way to kind of make it extremely secure. And we're just kind of pushing in that direction because, again, the consumer should not be involved in the process. I shouldn't have to get a code that I type in because with plenty of ways to manipulate that experience. All right. But what I do in my day-to-day life is I have another phone number and I only use that phone number for a second factor. And I use a phone number that does not have a call center. There's no way that someone can then poses me and do something to kind of SIM swap, etc. But you shouldn't have to go to that extreme, right? You should have easier ways to secure yourself. But no one knows that phone number. And if they did, there's actually no way for you to social engineer it. So I do that, and I do things like that kind of keep me safe. But, look, most people will say most consumers are lazy when maybe more charitable thing to say is we're all busy. Right? You have our jobs, our lives, our kids. We don't want to have to spend, an hour a week on securing ourselves. So people, most people won't do what I just did. They won't get another phone line from a specialty carrier that has no call center. But that's kind of what you have to do until we get to a better place.
Yeah, a scary but very good podcast about these things is that, do you know the podcast, The Perfect Scam?
Yeah, well, is that the one where the woman poses as someone else with a baby crying in the background?
That might be one of their episodes, but they have a lot where they talk about different scams. And
yeah,
one of those, of course, was SIM swapping and just how bad of a problem it can be. I don't have a second phone, but I removed the ability to change my email password via phone.
For sure. Yeah. And you don't get a phone. You can actually, again, it's a little bit technical, but if you have an iPhone or just a modern smartphone, it can get multiple eSIMs. So you can actually just download an eSIM over the air and in such a way that you're just paying $5 a month, which is annoying, a little expensive. But that way you have another phone number that, others aren't aware of. I'm not saying that.
Yeah. You can look at it like an insurance policy. That's $20 a month. Rodger, a lot of what we're talking is not very localized to just the US or just Canada. These are like very international problems. And Prove, you have customers and operations all over the world. Tell us about that expansion, the international expansion. What have you learned about it? What were some of the challenges?
Well, to your point, I don't think that the bad actors target just the U.S. or just target a certain bank. I mean, they're going to turn the handles on many doors to see if the door's open or easy to open, right? And they can do that at scale. So thankfully, I think things that we solve for at one customer in one country are extremely scalable to every customer in every country. So that kind of, there's a lot of like things that are very universal about what we do. So most consumers have phones. Phones have SIM cards. People make SIM cards, make EMV chips. Effectively, it's a bit like an EMV chip connected to the internet. And so the notion of kind of using keys to identify and authenticate folks is something we do in every country. Now, the way we go to market is we start with, thankfully, the U.S. is a broad, rich, deep market. We have plenty of customers that are only U.S., but there's plenty of customers that have global reach, right? And for those customers, we're going to be rolling out our services in as many markets as they need. Now, there's 5 billion adults on the planet. Today, because we tokenize identity against cryptographic keys, you can imagine one of our aspirations is to tokenize all 5 billion adults that want to be tokenized. And today, we're at the point where we have about 700 million adults that are tokenized on our way to 5 billion. We will have this year the ability to verify identity for about half the planet, so about 2.6 billion folks. So that's kind of the march. Like, how do we get to a point where you can accurately identify and authenticate the planet, all 5 billion adults? I'll give you an example of a use case that's common. So imagine you use a ride-sharing service, which is obviously very popular now. Like, they verify the drivers, of course, right, because they need to know who they are. But the conventional wisdom has been that you don't have to verify the riders because as long as they can pay, like, no one cares. So I could create an account and say I'm Taylor Swift, and okay, the guy, when I get in the car, the guy like, "Are Taylor?" And I'm like, "Yeah," and you won't even go any further, right? But now you have cases where these drivers would rather deliver a sandwich than a person because the sandwich will open their car, try to steal their phone, etc. The point being, these kinds of services where the internet facilitates humans interacting in the real world but don't know each other needs to have a kind of a circle of trust around that transaction. Now, on one hand, I don't want them driving to 1 a.m., and that's valid, but your anonymity, there should be a threshold by which you can break the glass and see, well, it wasn't Taylor Swift who's actually driving the side, right? Who tried to steal the car, the phone, the money, whatever it may be. And I think that notion of verifying these users, these consumers, but in a way that protects their privacy until they shouldn't be protected, is like a global thing for ride sharing, delivery services, right? Anything where humans going to show up in front of another human, which obviously is super convenient. I love the fact that I can get a sandwich delivered or get a car to pick me up, but it needs that trust and safety kind of envelope around it. So you can imagine as we tokenize the world, we'll be offering those types of capabilities for the biggest brands that give us these modern conveniences, but you need that envelope of security.
Yeah, I hope someone from Square or Cash App is listening. So Rodger, before I let you go, are there any books that you find yourself recommending often of any type, fiction, nonfiction, business, non-business?
Look, there's a lot of folks that talk about the books that change their lives. There's a lot of confirmation bias as well, right? You don't often recommend things that you already agree with what you agree with. A funny trend, and maybe it's to answer your question kind of indirectly. Not when I grew up, authority was big brands like the New York Times, right? Versus your friend down the street. And what the internet has done is that it's kind of destroyed the reputation or the credibility of these top-down institutions, whether it's religion or media. But that doesn't mean it's gone away. The internet's kind of has figured out a way to find the others. So if you wanted to find 1,000 people on the planet that happen to like the Grateful Dead and also lasagna, that group exists somewhat. And so the reweaving of community is really powerful. And my point is, I think what's more interesting is finding those groups of people. I think Timothy Leary had this quote back in the 60s of like, find the others. But it's very thoughtful because there is someone who cares about the thing you care about, no matter how niche it is. And those communities, I think, are amazing. So when I tap into this kind of subreddit or whatever it may be, or the community of like you're surprised at how many people care about those things, that very thing you care about. in such a way that I think you learn a ton from that that's more relevant than maybe the more thoughtful things written in history, which again are important and universal and durable. But I think finding those communities that are bottom up versus the top down institutions we grew up with is one of the most exciting things about modern connectedness.
Yeah, and these are global communities. They could be anywhere in the world. Rodger, thanks for spending the time. Really fascinating stuff going on at Prove, and you've given us a lot to think about. So thanks for that.
Miguel, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you for your contribution to our industry.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this great episode with Rodger Desai, CEO of Prove Identity. If you want more interviews, make sure to subscribe, follow, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. It helps and truly means a lot. And if you have any suggestions or thoughts about the show, just drop me a line on Twitter or LinkedIn. Signing off till next week, I'm your host, Miguel Armaza.